All right, welcome back, everybody. Happy to talk today to Rina Shah. She's a political strategist and commentator. She was the first Never Trump delegate in 2016. Rina Shah, welcome back to the news.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Happy to be with you.
Great to talk with you, and I want to start with Mitch McConnell. He announced on Wednesday he plans to step down from his leadership post in November. This will make his tenure. He'll be the longest serving Senate leader in history. But he's also kind of leaving at a point where it feels like he's lost a lot of influence. So, what are
Yeah.
we to make of his legacy?
So I would say the most frustrating thing for me to hear about him announcing his resignation now, essentially, is that it's tied to Trump. It's not entirely tied to Trump. It just can't be because last year he had two moments where he froze up in public. I mean, that's just not something we are at all accustomed to in U.S. politics. It's a thoroughly modern problem we have with these octogenarians who remain in office. And so I appreciated his remarks from the floor. I really did, because you got to talk about passing the baton. I applauded Nancy Pelosi when she finally did it. And look, you've got a brilliant strategist as the leader of the Democrats on the House side in Hakeem Jeffries. So, could we see somebody of that variety kind of come out, a known unknown? That's the question du jour, right? Who is going to be the person that succeeds McConnell, able to really take that torch, be an institutionalist like he was? Of course, these are like the highest hopes we could have for anybody. I just don't think we'll see anything like that happen on the Senate side, Matt. I mean, it's just not kind of how the Senate works at all. He's been, I hate the word to use, but really having a stable of younger senators by his side for a long time. We've all known that. And Joni Ernst has been part of that mix. I very much have enjoyed her as a senator, not just because she's a woman, but she's very assertive and very much believes in the institution of the Senate. But let's not forget, John Thune has been ever present by his side. And that to me is the likely successor, although there are a couple other Johns in the race. We're talking about of course, Cornyn as well, and there's Barrasso. That senator is also well known, but Cornyn is getting feisty with it right now, and I think that's rather interesting, being called a rhino and kind of taking jabs at people within Texas. Ken Paxton, are you listening? So this is going to be an interesting thing to see. Although I will say, I mean, look at Thune, who just came out and endorsed Trump recently. So it tells you people really want this job. They're glad that McConnell is moving on. But it's going to be a tough, tough job. I don't think McConnell was waning in influence. I just genuinely don't believe that even though he's slowed down, something I've seen over a decade now. I saw him, like I said, a decade now. I've seen him just really not being himself. Over a decade ago, Mitch McConnell was very much somebody you feared if you ran into him in the
Yeah.
hall. And I did sometimes. I would run into him in his home state of Kentucky. And what's happened recently, Matt, we know this. He's been confronted by voters when he goes back home. And that's a tough thing to go up against when you just really haven't got the physical or emotional energy for the job.
No, it's really sad because you could make an argument that Mitch McConnell, by not having those hearings for Merrick Garland, keeping that Supreme Court seat open, got Donald Trump elected, and also was able then subsequently was able to confirm three conservative justices that overturned Roe. That's a 50-year project for conservative pro-lifers, and yet McConnell is hated not only by some Democrats who view him as the enemy,
Yeah.
but also by Republicans who see him as this sellout squish establishment type. So I kind of feel like this is a sad exodus. But some of it I think is McConnell's fault. Let me go to this speech he gave during the impeachment trial for Donald Trump when he said, "There's no question that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of that day. The people who stormed this building believe they were acting on his wishes and instructions of their president." But of course, Mitch McConnell voted against convicting Trump. So, in a way, I feel like, he's created this monster to a certain degree.
I think you put it best when you say the sad exodus, because what is his legacy now? what are we really going to remember about McConnell? We're probably going to mostly remember how he played it safe in recent years, just remained within the lines, never really drawing outside of them. And to me, that's not real leadership. You know, Matt, come on. The most simple, basic tenet we always talk about, whether you're part of the punditry class or not, is the three branches and how they were created to check each other. And I think that's the part where I think Mitch McConnell bears a great deal of responsibility for that not being the case. I mean, there's so much he could have done in the 8 years that we've seen pass now, in which I don't remember anything really good coming out of his office. I just remember a hell of a lot of no and a whole lot of I'm going to carry Trump's water when it's convenient to me. And then just recently, which Thune and Cornyn are now going to kind of suffer from, they stood up for McConnell and they stood up for this $95 billion package. I can't even believe we talk in billions anymore. By the way, it's just
We're
like the
talking
crazy.
about funding Ukraine,
Yeah, the
which
foreign
is
aid.
something that, Ronald Reagan, I believe, would have been for. It's something that Mitch McConnell believes. It's something every Republican 10 years ago would have supported, and we would have
That's right.
attacked Democrats in the left as weak and not committed to the free world and internationalism if they didn't support it. And now because McConnell is like, on the outs because he's seen as somehow like an
Yeah.
establishment sellout because he actually wants to support Ukraine.
Right. That foreign aid package, if I can just get real, very brutally honest, I think him seeing what that sort of brush up with it all kind of how it all sort of happened, and how it played out in the public sphere. I think that's what led to this announcement, to be very frank,
Yeah.
because it's just not in line with who he is anymore. And he's kind of saying to himself, well, if I can't go out on a damn high note, why am I still here? And so he's kind of, I got to be honest, it's inside baseball to say that was it, but people are going to hate him no matter what. And I think he's just said, now's the time. I don't think it was particularly strategic timing. I mean, he could have done it anytime between now and November. What's the real difference? Especially again, like I said, on the Senate side, it's rather predictable. It's not as unpredictable as the House, where you get a Speaker Johnson or a Hakeem Jeffries. It's just not going to end up like that. I think we're going
But
to
don't
have
you
somebody we
think,
know.
I mean, don't you think though that Donald Trump essentially is now like traditionally it would have been very clear one of the three Johns would have gotten
For
to
sure.
become minority or majority leader, depending after McConnell leaves in November. But I think now it could be anybody. It could be Tom Graves. It could be anybody because Donald
Fair.
Trump, I assume, is going to pick somebody, and that person will then have no independence. Like McConnell, say what you will about him. I
Yeah.
don't think he was always as courageous. Sometimes he stood up to Trump, sometimes he didn't. I think he tried to be strategic and cunning, and sometimes he was too cute by half. Um, but at least McConnell was an independent actor.
Yeah.
I assume Donald Trump is going to select the next Republican leader in the Senate. That person will probably kill the filibuster if Republicans get the majority and Trump becomes president. So we're losing the checks and balances you talked about a second ago.
Yeah, yeah. When you talk about somebody like a Senator Graves, I don't know. I'm just not so sure. Maybe I'm a little bit more optimistic on this bit because I think the senators are looking at the House side and they're seeing their colleagues on the other side of the Capitol and being like, that's a blow it all up situation. We don't want to be faced with that. We want to be the adults. I mean, the Senate takes itself very seriously. Like, these are people who aspire to be where they are. These are like sort of what would be considered an appointment to the Supreme Court. These senators stay. The great many of them die in office. I mean, look at Feinstein on the other side of the aisle. I mean, just clutching until the last moment, and that is what I think so many Americans are just absolutely furious about. I mean, we know Gen Z is furious about it, but I think millennials like me are too, because there's a great disconnect because there's just so much of what McConnell and his ilk would consider a very serious history. Like I've been seeing people on social media try to push back and be like, no, 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 you don't understand who you're insulting here. There will never be another Mitch McConnell. And it's like, but what do you want me to remember? Because he stayed so long and then he stayed at a time where Washington got worse, not better. The
Yeah.
institution of Congress got worse, not better because of their higher disapproval ratings. And therefore, you're not doing the job that the Constitution says you ought to be doing, which is checking the members of the executive branch as well as the judicial branch. And it doesn't matter what their political stripes are. So you hear me getting super passionate about it all because I've started to become part of this class of right of center folks that really believes that we need certain systemic reforms to make things stick, to not end up with another McConnell that just will, at a turtle's pace, not leave office.
And by the way, I don't know if I said Tom Graves. If I said Tom Graves, I meant Tom Cotton.
Sure.
But anyway,
Oh,
uh,
Senator Cotton, my gosh. Wow, we could do a whole episode on him. Goodness.
um, let's see. Well, I agree. Like, if we're judging McConnell based on is the institution stronger, is the institution of the U.S. Senate stronger or weaker since he was, became the leader? It's worse. Is the Republican Party in better shape today or worse?
No.
It's worse. Now, I don't think it's fair to blame him for all of it, but it did kind of happen on his watch.
Yeah.
Are we better off? No, actually. I think everything's worse. I blame Trump for most of that, but McConnell didn't stop it. So I think his legacy deserves an asterisk at the very least.
Yeah.
Um, let's move
I
to the
will say
Supreme
though, Matt,
Court. I'm sorry, go
there
ahead.
there's one thing I wanted to interject here because you got me thinking about this. I frequently get called ageist on social media for saying things in different platforms about age and term limits and whatnot, because people have strong feelings about this stuff. And I get it. I also used to feel some kind of way about term limits, and I've changed my mind. Over years of attending CPAC, years ago, I used to say the US Term Limits Convention went from like being this tiny table to being a bigger booth. And though I haven't attended CPAC in years, I will say I have seen younger conservatives change their mind. So I'm not, I'm mentioning the ages stuff because we could look at a Senator Hawley, for example. Like age doesn't really matter. I mean, if you look at Senator Hawley and his wife and the outsized impact they've had on what happens here at the federal level. I mean, his wife, judicially speaking, if I'm not mistaken, she is the one who had that hand in overturning Roe. And that's the story that doesn't get talked about enough. And Holly, because you talked about January 6th a little bit ago, we remember the fist pump and then the cowering and hiding out. Like these are not profiles in courage. Just because somebody's younger doesn't mean they're better or have any kind of desire to learn from their elders and move up and really protect this institution and make it thrive. I just want to
Yeah.
interject with that because Holly
Yeah.
really boggles my mind. When I start talking about him, I'm just like, man, Missouri, I love you guys, but what'd you do?
Yeah. No, I wish we lived in a time when there was respect for elders and also elders knew when to go out
Yeah,
on top,
yeah.
Um, I feel bad for Mitch. Like I feel bad for Mitch McConnell. Um,
He
I
lost
told
a
my wife this
sister-in-law
morning,
too. He
there's
lost his
A Joan
sister-in-law
Didion
really
quote, writers
tragically.
are always selling somebody out. And it's like my column was mean that I wrote recently about Mitch McConnell. I think it's all true. Everything I wrote,
Yeah,
I
it is
agree.
true.
Obviously I agree with what I wrote. But I wish I didn't have to write that column. I wish I could write like, congratulations, well done, thou faithful servant. Here's your gold watch. But I don't think he quite qualifies for that.
And I would agree with that. It's a moment where you have to wonder, will other people take notice? And I just don't have much faith that anybody is sitting there saying, ah, this is a story. We can do better for future generations. Because it's not like what I mean, in coming up in politics, that was always the talking point. We've got to do better for America's next generation. I mean, Nikki Haley talked about it ad nauseum on the debate stages. Our children will never forgive us, the line she won't stop saying, which is like, I'm like, okay, after the second time I heard it, I was like, enough already. Please retire that line. We get it. But it's also a situation in which, like, does that even hit the consciousness of those in power? Does it make them realize their own mortality like Mitch has been forced to see now?
And by the way, Mitch McConnell is actually slightly older than Trump and Biden. But I
Yeah.
think, as you can tell, an unspoken theme so far is that we've got, it's not just McConnell. I mean, we've got the two presumptive nominees are right on his heels
Oh
in
yeah.
terms of,
That's like a year or two apart for him
yeah.
and Biden, right? So
All right,
it's
let's
a
shift
wild
gears.
time.
Supreme Court will review Donald Trump's claim that he is immune from prosecution for actions taken while in office, further delaying Trump's federal trial and the nation's capital on charges of conspiring to overturn the 2020 election. What do you make of that?
Oh my gosh. I have to take a deep sigh. That was frustrating. That was frustrating to see come across the wires. Sitting there having dinner with my family, and I'm like, no. It wasn't even dinner. I think I was making dinner, and I was like, "No, really? Like, come on, SCOTUS. Man, this is one we got to unpack for me, Matt, because I'm a new American, so the kid of immigrants, and I take great issue with anybody who tries to come over illegally, stay illegally, all that. So like some of these like sort of founding values are really important to me because they're so new to me and they're really woven into the story of my upbringing because when you're so close to the values of why your parents came over, um it just I think they hit a little different. And that's not trying to say I'm any better of an American than anyone else. I'm just saying I think a lot about what the founders wanted for the very reason that like what's in the Constitution matters to me. And I think the founders didn't want a king. They didn't want somebody. Oh, well, I know the founders didn't want a king. I think they didn't want somebody that could shield themselves from potential prosecution for any criminal activity that has been, has seen its day in court. And I'm just trying to put it in the most elementary terms because I think this is the way we need to port this out to people. This is a very simple thing to me. What is presidential immunity? I mean, to me, that's stuff that happens in third world countries. I don't think I'm going off the deep end here with that. It's so simple. It's about the
Yeah.
rule of law and not having a king.
No,
And that's it.
I think you're totally right. And the founders were, this was a big, big, big concern of theirs. Um, and, they looked to Rome and Greece and all that. But I don't think, in my opinion, the problem, like, I don't think there's a lot of danger that they're going to rule that Trump was immune. Like, I don't think
Sure.
that's going to happen. But I
Okay.
think what's happening is that there's this delay. And
Mhm.
so what it means is that this trial will not happen until after the election, which means if Trump wins, it will never happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that to me, like, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a constitutional expert, but it seems to me that the Supreme Court could have expedited this decision, or just not taken it up, right?
Yeah.
Allow the current decision to stand. And basically, I think what's happening now is that this trial is now postponed like a couple of extra months, and like that that could be the difference between Trump being convicted, or Trump just calling off the Department of Justice and saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm president. This case is closed."
Right. And I think that latter point you make is even more, that's the danger to me, is that at the point at which he again re-enters the White House, which there is a great possibility of, we shouldn't act like it's not possible. It very much is, for a range of reasons. I mean, the political wins, you and I know, they are what they are, and they will continue to sort of shift the tides of this race in a way that are it is so unpredictable. And I don't know that any of us could have ever, even if you gave us the cards, laid out the tarot, we could have never predicted this. So I am more concerned about the latter, about him potentially re-entering the White House and this trial just never happening. Because that to me then puts us truly in that banana republic scenario and category at which then what are we able to say to the world? Then what's our role in the world? Truly, it's redefined at that point. And that is the greatest danger to me because then that's a country that I no longer really know. Because all these years I rejected folks saying to me, well, when Trump was in the White House, especially, right? Like, this is your president. I'm like, first of all, I didn't vote for him. Cross party lines and vote for Biden, which I regret that vote on many days of the week. But more likely than not, I'm able to at least say this is a situation in which I know the country is better off with Trump out of the White House than it is with him in it.
So I didn't vote for Trump or Biden. Well, I did vote for Biden in the Democratic primary against Bernie Sanders, but
Oh, okay.
in the general election, yeah, that was a strategic thing. I was living at the time
Yeah.
in Virginia. I was living in Virginia at the time. It was kind of an important election. I'd never
Yeah.
voted in a Democratic primary in my life before,
Oh,
but so in the general though, I've never voted for Trump or Hillary or Biden. I just
sure.
voted for Ronald Reagan or something. But
Yeah.
you said
Same.
that you often regret voting for Biden. Why is that?
I especially regret it nowadays. Look, a couple reasons. I have a really young family. We are in the thick of trying to make our careers. My husband and I, we got three really little children. and they're just the oldest is in the younger part of elementary school, and then I've got a baby that's a year and a half old, and it's kind of weird that life, it feels extremely hard economically speaking. We should not feel this way. We should feel some degree of upward mobility, and I think it all kind of stems from this anxiety we have of really the economy being what it is, just the price of daily commodities. And I'm like, if I'm feeling the burn and we've got two incomes, was everybody else doing? And it's this feeling of like kind of like everything's on fire, but who's at the wheel? Oh, wait, the Biden administration today wants to tell me that the numbers are good. Okay, the stock market's doing great, but most Americans aren't participating in the stock market. And a lot of my peers, I've got to be honest, and I hope this doesn't make me seem unserious to folks, but take a walk down this lane with me. Decentralized finance was getting really hot in some millennial circles. Like when we talk about crypto and Bitcoin and people feeling like empowered by decentralized finance, that's all because of this angst we feel that like our government is not serving us. They're not fixing things in a manner that can give us that two-car garage, white picket fence, ability to get another house in 5 to 8 years. Like we are handcuffed to this mortgage. And it is a hard place to be in when you're just like, wait, I thought things were going to shake out a little differently. So first the economic thing, but second is much shorter than the whole little monologue I just gave you about like how life feels really heavy financially in recent years. And look, I recognize we came out of the pandemic, but secondly, uh, I've just got to be super frank about it. And again, I run the risk of being ageist, and I come from a culture. The Indian culture is all about respecting your elders. But I voted for Joe Biden in 2020, not just hoping and wishing, but being given assurances by many folks in the political class uh, that he would be a one-term president.
Yeah.
And
A
that
bridge to the next generation.
that annoys the heck out of me, Matt. And that's why I'm so teed off. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this is kind of a sick with power type of thing,
But
right? Okay.
I think once he picked Kamala Harris as his running mate,
Yeah.
and so he picks Kamala Harris as the running mate, horrible candidate.
Horrible pick, by the
And
way.
then Trump
Yeah.
comes back, which I don't think people predicted, or I mean, you and I might have, but most people I don't
Sure.
think thought, because
No.
just historically speaking, in modern history, it's
Yeah.
one and done. You lose and you're out. And so I think Biden might have uh, stepped aside, but he had those two problems. Trump's coming back, and oh, the person I picked as my running mate for political reasons can't beat him, can't win.
Yeah, she's pretty weak on many levels, and as you can imagine, I get a lot of side eyes and raised eyebrows because the sense is that wait, you got your South Asian woman in the White House. I'm like, okay, so a lot to unpack there. She has a complicated history. She wouldn't have been my first pick. I think she was an identity choice, and it's kind of like how when Biden picked Ketanji, for to be a justice, and I'm like, come on, did you have to tell us it'd be a black woman? Couldn't you have just chosen her like as this qualified, competent, incredible woman? These identity picks get wrapped up in a lot, and I think Kamala has really suffered from that. She's tried to be everything to everyone, and frankly hasn't been anything to anyone in doing so. So she's likable, but I don't know, this is then we get into that weird thing of the women and likability thing. But the problem is they haven't deployed her where she really needs to be deployed. And that to me is hugely frustrating, because it's too late now to do that. And then when she went down to Honduras and did other such things that are south of the border, it was like, don't come. Is that a policy? She's just not able to really ever make the case for why she is the best heir apparent. And so again,
Yeah.
yes, there's that. And yeah,
But I
that's a
think part
really
of the
hard thing
problem
for.
too was that, and Sarah Palin had this problem, right? She was
Oh
this
yeah,
talented, in my opinion, in Alaska, she had this political talent, but she hadn't really had to struggle and make a name for herself, right? She was mayor of Wasilla. Yes, it's sort of a big deal to be, governor of Alaska, but you're not really in the national spotlight. You're not doing Meet the Press and all
yeah,
that.
that's fair.
And then she's airdropped in this campaign, and then it's sink or swim. And in a way, I feel the same way about Kamala, right? Like she
Sure.
was just elevated to that Senate seat in California, and then she was elevated she runs a horrible campaign for president. And then,
It's
but Biden,
awful.
Biden
Financially
picks her. And
speaking,
so
like,
I don't think she had
yeah.
the benefit of struggling and succeeding slowly and kind of growing in the process. Like, I don't think she's ready for prime time.
I would agree with that. And now she's had 4 years to be ready, but when you can't run your own presidential campaign well and then you get picked up to be the VP, like what's even happening here? And that's I think that's offensive, actually. I mean, I ran into Amy Klobuchar last year and I remember like taking a moment to fangirl her. And I think a part of her had to have been like, why are you fangirling me? But I liked her. I just thought she could have been a real unifying VP choice. But I also very much liked Val Demings of Florida, who now is nowhere in elected office, as far as I know. So, some real missteps by the Biden camp, and now, I mean, they're not running a great campaign in my estimation. I think Trump is, as you and I both know, is running a better campaign than he's ever run,
Yeah. He's
because the
got
people he's got
Su-
around him.
Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita
Yeah.
seem real pros who are running this thing. Let me ask you, if the election were held today, would you vote Biden? Would you vote Trump, or would you vote Reagan, or just go out for pizza? What would you do?
Yeah, I think I would go out for pizza. That because I mean, that first of all, pizza always wins. It is one of my favorite foods ever, and it's just a feeling that I cannot help either. And if staying at home means staying at home and not being part of the count, it's not something I ever thought I'd say, but it is the only way to not help what I would consider the
Yeah.
bigger, which is
Well,
Trump.
in the immortal words of PJ O'Rourke, don't vote, it just encourages the bastards. So
Oh,
that could be our motto this year.
I love that one. That's a good one.
Let's turn to Michigan, where the AP reports that although Joe Biden won the state's Democratic primary with more than 618,000 votes, more than 100,000 voters cast ballots for, quote, uncommitted in the race. The vote totals raised concerns for Democrats in the state. Biden won by only, what is it, 154,000 votes in 2020. Biden was beaten by the uncommitted vote in both Dearborn and, help me with this, maybe Hamtramck. I don't know how to pronounce that. Maybe it's a misspelling. Anyway, where Arab Americans make up close to half of the population. If you're a Democrat, is this of concern or much ado about nothing?
Well, the narrative I've heard from Democrats is let's sweep this under the rug because they're embarrassed, no doubt. I mean, sure, it's a slim percentage in the big scheme of things, but it signals the bigger issue you have is that you had this loyalty that was almost built in, and now they feel that you're not for them. And I'm talking about Muslim Americans feeling really betrayed by Biden, feeling alarmed that this is maybe something akin to, obviously it's not the same, but drawing something of a parallel to when Trump debuted his Muslim ban. So look, I'm not a big fan of Representative Rashida Tlaib. I mean, the congresswoman, what, she came into office with the word MFer for Trump, and I'm like, come on, do we have to do that? Like, that's beneath you to curse like that. I will say it was at an off the hill event. But still, her whole kind of mantra of like, just, he is not for us, like, do not help him, we do not owe anything to Biden. um it's totally something that Democrats ought to be concerned about, and I don't think are taking seriously enough, because look at how slow the Biden Blinken duo has been about even saying the word ceasefire here stateside. Like, it took months. That's, to me, a little ridiculous. So again, who's at the wheel here, and why is everything like a day late and frankly a dollar short?
So, I mean, from my standpoint,
Sure.
I feel like Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th,
No doubt.
kidnapped a whole bunch of people, and have not released them.
Yeah.
And I just don't know what we want. Like, of course, Israel is going to have to go to war, and this could end when those hostages are released.
Yeah.
I don't understand how anybody could be mad at Israel or Biden
Mm.
when they're not the ones who launched an attack. They're not the ones who took hostages. What's Biden supposed to do? Go, side with, you know, I mean, I
Yeah.
realize there's a distinction between the Palestinians in Gaza and Hamas, but, there's also a lot of overlap as well.
And you're right about that. I have a friend who has lived through obviously occupation, is Palestinian, grew up in that. Just said, having Israeli Defense Forces in my house was just how I grew up. But his dad was a tremendous advocate for peace, and anybody who's interested in him, he's written a great book. His name is Yusuf Bashir, and he's here at the stateside. And his mom and brother are still there in his family home. His dad is big on peace, and he's actually a PhD student at Johns Hopkins, and he's writing his dissertation on Hamas. And I agree with him about this one thing he said to me very simply when in October, and he said, "You try to cut Hamas, and another Hamas is going to crop right back up." And he's like, I just he and this is somebody who believes in peace, and I'm somebody that wants peace, and I understand how complicated things are over there. I'm not Muslim, I'm not Christian, I'm not even Jewish. So where do I factor into this whole thing? Actually, so I'm a member of what I would consider not really a religion, but what would be considered a way of life, which is Jainism. So anybody who's heard of Buddhism, Jainism is something of a contemporary religion. I do practice some bits of Hinduism as well, and so that is essentially where I've come up with this feeling that we must do anything for peace, and that's why I want to see a ceasefire. Of course, Israel has a right to defend itself, and I want to see the hostages return, number one. But I also want to see the end of indiscriminate bombing of women and children and just anybody. And the fact that we're just going to say, well, they put Hamas in power, right? And so they must suffer. I'm thinking to myself, when I hear my Arab American friends cry, my Palestinian American friends cry about these dead bodies we see on the daily, I wake up and I had to take an Instagram break actually for a while,
Yeah.
because as a mother, even now I've had to mute some of my friends who are doing incredible journalism work, and I myself have appeared at Al Jazeera Media Network. I have been a commentator there for since 2017. I got to be honest, my sympathy is with everybody because I just want peace. And so hostages returned, people not to be killed indiscriminately in the name of finding terrorists and eliminating terrorists. But I also do think Benjamin Netanyahu is a bit of a madman. And that is my feeling. And I understand when Nikki Haley says they're our only ally in the region, so we got to have their back. But Matt, it's really, really hard to tell that to people who are members of the Muslim faith. When it feels like they're not being treated equally. They're like, we are part of a state-sponsored genocide. Bibi is, killing these people. He's eliminating them simply because they are Palestinians who voted for Hamas, right? And that is where they say our taxpayer money shouldn't go towards having an ally's back like that, just unfettered support. We need to check that support. And that's where I say the Biden Blinken duo came to this conclusion so late. And so I get what you're saying. Like it's really hard to divorce Hamas of all this when they are the instigators.
Yeah.
They are the problem. They are terrorists. And I wish we could eliminate them. But I also believe in the right of these people to exist, the Palestinian people. And I wish we could get back to talking about a two-state solution. But right now, as we just have Israel's back to just bomb like this with our money and to just see the dead bodies of children and see them hungry and starving, it is really just hard, I think, as a human, because we've never been in this moment. We've never had streams of this come to us from to our phones, in our faces, rapidly, quickly, rapidly, constantly. And so it kind of changes the consciousness. And that's what I hear from my Arab American friends, is that the sense of betrayal is from that. Like, let's not have BB's back completely, just like unfettered support shouldn't be there.
It's
That's
definitely, I
really
mean,
all
it's
I can describe it as. Sorry, I went a little long there.
That's okay. I mean,
Hard
it's
to talk about.
definitely a wedge issue for Democrats. I mean, for
Yeah.
Biden, he either angers a lot a lot of pro-Israel Americans, or he angers this voting bloc in Michigan that could
Yeah.
totally swing the election. I guess I would just quote PJ O'Rourke once again, give war a chance. Okay. So
Ooh,
like
okay.
my argument would be, I'll draw a parallel to like
Yeah.
Ukraine, right?
Tell me.
Russia invades Ukraine, and then everybody says, "Oh, let's have peace." Well, they've invaded us. They're in our country.
Yeah,
That we would love to have peace with them, but they have to leave our country. And if we have peace now, if we have a ceasefire now, they win, right?
sure, sure.
Similarly, it's like you guys invaded Israel, not you guys, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Hamas invaded Israel, um, took our people. I'm not Jewish, but
yeah,
um, I'm using the terms colloquially here. Uh,
sure.
but if at that point now there's a ceasefire, like and peace, like the incentive is just do it again. Like what's stopping them from
Right,
two
right.
years from now doing it again? What'll happen is, you know, Hamas kills a bunch of Israelis, takes a bunch of hostages. Everybody's up in arms for a couple months, and then eventually public opinion will turn against Israel and force them to give up the fight.
Yeah, this gets so dicey when we game it out that way. I think for me, it's just two different scenarios, two different, completely different moments of geopolitical tension that don't have that much to do with one another. And that's where I'm willing to be wrong. And I'm willing to change and learn and understand that maybe war is necessary for certain moments. But in Ukraine, I mean, Putin went in there wanting to just annex it like he did Crimea, right? Like, just give it to me and I will stay here and I will take it forever and it's mine. What Hamas did, obviously going into Israel and taking these people and committing the most abhorrent atrocities that are unspeakable acts, is awful on every level as well. There's death and destruction in both of these scenarios, but to me, it's that Hamas is not trying to permanently stay there in Israel.
But no, they want from the river to the sea. that
Yeah,
means that they want to do it. They
they
don't have
want to
the
do it, right?
yeah, they
But
don't
how
have the manpower that
do
Putin
we do
has.
it? I guess to me, it's like they're not tactically doing it right now, whereas like Russia is actively going and physically killing Ukraine. We can see that they're physically going there and actively taking that land. Okay, we've killed this many people, we've got this much land, it's done here. And because I'm not seeing that activity there, and but I'm hearing it, yes, from the river to the sea, they're saying they want it. I guess what I'm just trying to say right now is like maybe a ceasefire would allow folks to get back to the table and maybe set us back to where we were during the Trump era. And yeah, things weren't great. And maybe that was the breeding ground for how Hamas was able to grow and get the intelligence that it did in order to go and do what it did. But I just fear that right now we're so far behind, and Biden and Blinken have not given me the assurances that they can do anything to get both parties to the table. It's just going to continue to be death and destruction. Whereas to me, if we give Ukraine everything they need to push back on aggression, then Russia goes back, recedes, and then it's like, okay, you've left, we've won because we physically pushed you out, right? So maybe the answer is just return the damn hostages.
That would be
Return the
nice.
damn hostages. That is it.
All right. Let's end on a lighter, although still sad note. Um, Tyler Boebert, the 18-year-old son of Representative Lauren Boebert, was arrested Tuesday in Colorado related to a string of alleged property thefts and vehicle trespasses, according to police. This
Ooh,
is the son who made Lauren Boebert a grandmother last year at the age of 36. I should also note I wouldn't if he was under 18, I would not be bringing this up. I'm
sure.
going to say fair game. This past year has seen Lauren Boebert's ex-husband arrested twice and her appearing to get handsy with another man in a local theater. The Boeberts seem to have a long history of running afoul of the law. In 2020, the Denver Post reported that then congressional candidate Lauren Boebert, who often espouses a pro police law and order message, has been arrested and summoned at least 4 times over the past decade, records show. What is up with the Boebert family? And is this just the Sarah Palin family 2.0?
This is so screwed up on every level. I mean, isn't the Republican Party supposed to be the party that wants to strengthen the American family unit? Like this is nonsense. This is a mother who's not being a mother. This is a mother who's more concerned with her own vanity than she is with what her children should be learning from her. Like he's not that old, and this is a situation in which you got to wonder, how long do you continue to look at somebody like that as a leader? If these are the kind of people making it into Congress, representing us. I mean, we already know so many of them represent their own values, right? They want to enrich themselves. They see Congress as a way to stardom and bigger bank accounts. That's no secret. I mean, she's part of that. She's part of this, the triad of Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, and with her being that third leg, of just pure nonsense. And I mean, Gates has got his own issues. Marjorie Taylor Greene has got her own issues, but these aren't just fiscal issues. This isn't just like, oh, you should get a slap on the wrist for like one campaign finance violation. This is like dealing with underage women in Gates's scenario, with which Marjorie Taylor Greene, has been so much talk, and of course I should just say it's speculation, of course, about her infidelities and then just her abhorrent behavior in public, like the way this woman behaves. Like, I can't believe these women are mothers. And I'm gonna go ahead and like throw that down and just be honest about that. Like, the minute you become a mother, just like, I know your wife would say this. I've met her. She's so lovely. I mean, we really believe in like really conducting yourself in a manner that's respectable in public. Because, like, what do we teach kids in schools? Like, there's a certain way to behave, there's a certain value system, there's a social pact. Do not give your person some kind of, sexual activity in a theater. Like, listen to authorities when they say no vaping allowed. Like, she's just a rule breaker. And this is a congresswoman. So, yeah,
Yeah.
over. Sorry,
And the
Matt.
thing
I
too is,
can't with her.
there are people who, like, number one, everyone's made mistakes, and we're not responsible for our kids at a certain point, and yada yada
Sure.
yada. But like, there's different levels, right? There's the level where, like, a long time ago you did something, and you have skeletons in your closet, and then there's like, you're doing something bad, but you're trying to keep it on the down low. And then
Yeah.
there's like where, no, every other week you're arrested for something, or you're like involved in a like public scandal where like, or one of your kids, I mean, like the Palins went through
Yeah.
all the, you
Oh, they
know,
did. Yeah.
I can't even think of all like the different kids and the husband and the divorces, and just, it was
Yeah.
like white trash trailer park stuff. I live in West Virginia. Look, I'm fine with it. But it was over the top at a certain point. And it's like, what don't like, if the things if this is what we know about, what's
Yeah.
happening that we don't know about? Like, what, like, in a way, it's like a shamelessness as well, which, like,
Well,
I'm all for shame. I think shame is healthy, because when you flaunt your bad behavior, that's when it's really over the top.
she is really something else. And I got to stand up for my native West Virginia here. Like, you don't hear members of the West Virginia delegation doing this kind of nonsense. Like I talked about, that triad is Florida, Colorado, Georgia. Go check your people, man.
Good
Marjorie
point.
Taylor Greene and Gates and Boebert. I mean, but again, this is representative of like, is this what the under 40 set is doing? I think Matt Gates is a little over 40 now, if I'm not mistaken. But Lauren is Boebert. She is 37 last I checked. I mean, this is a woman that
She's a
has
grandmother.
that just blows my mind. Okay, first of all, I mean, I had like my second kid at that age, but whatever. Whatever floats your boat. You have the kids when it feels right to you. And look, rural communities are used to a little bit of drama, but that Palin stuff was pale in comparison to what we're seeing out of, again, the triad of just nonsense. And the fact is, they make no issue of it. In fact, they like that it's kind of out there so that they can fight back. And this is my real problem with the moment, Matt. And I know you care about this too. It's the victimhood stuff they do. Oh, look at how the left is coming
Yeah.
after me. And it's because I'm outspoken and I did this, but I'm getting an unfair shake at things and I'm being unfairly scrutinized. No, you're doing ridiculous, ridiculous stuff. And whenever a member of the squad does it or anybody else does anything similar, I will condemn them in the same way because
Yeah.
you are our leaders. You are people I'm supposed to tell my children to look up to emulate, to try to want to be like, and
But
I can't do it.
She's the kind of person who would get up and talk about crime in the inner city and
Yeah.
carjacking and stealing cars, and how this is all because there's not prayer in school, and whatever. Like, she's going to get up on her high horse and talk
Yeah.
about, we need family values. Well, like, how many families have this number of arrests? I
And
mean,
and
it's unbelievable.
I just worry that like this is what my generation will start to think is normal of people who go to Congress. Like, is this what we're just allowed to see? Is this kind of behavior just part and parcel with somebody who's in the public square? And every time are they just going to scream, "Well, there's a witch hunt after me. I'm the victim here." Like that is just not what we do as Americans. Like you're not a victim. You live a really amazing life. Like I know earlier in our conversation, I was heeing and hawing about like the state of the economy, but like that's the kind of stuff I want to get back to, not
Yes.
debating, like
I want to live in a country where I can complain about like we need to do entitlement reform or like
yeah.
I miss those debates.
Yeah, let's talk about school choice again, not like
Yeah.
what your kids are doing in school that's absolutely ridiculous behavior. And I just can't stop using that word for these people because they seem to thrive on that ridiculousness. But we are the MTV generation, and there was that show. So who
I blame
knows?
Rachel Campos Duffy. There, I've said it. Um, awesome talking to you. Anything you want to plug or anything I
Oh
forgot?
man. Look, I'm nowadays just a simple mom living in our nation's capital, trying to keep my kids humble. I still once a small town girl, now living in an uber political world. So I'm having fun getting out there, just trying to get people, just concerned about the issues. So if you want to follow me on social anywhere, I'm Rena in DC. But other than that, I have no agenda. I just want everybody to care about this election. And even if you choose pizza, which I may actually write pizza on the ballot, just show up to the polls.
Don't stop believing. Choose pizza. Rina Shah, thank you for coming back on the news.
Thank you, Matt, for having me. This is so fun.